Let us go. Welcome to Frankly Hockey. That's the star, Frank Saravalli. I'm merely John Butchergross. December 16th, 2025. Good day, Frank.
How you doing, John?
Good. Happy birthday, Eric Belanger. Remember him? 7 teams, including the Atlanta Thrashers. We always like to give a shout-out to the Thrashers. We got 10 games tonight, Frank. Oilers at Penguins. We're getting Jarry versus Skinner. God bless the hockey
It's
gods.
the rules.
It's the rules. We know. We're looking. I'll be watching that tonight. We're dialed into that one. Brett Kulak wearing number 77 with the Penguins. That's Paul Coffey back in the day with the Penguins. The Oilers, not so much. The Minnesota Wild. Yeah, they're home to the Capitals tonight. So Quinn Hughes, we get to see him again against Alex Ovechkin and the Caps. So that's going to be a strong one to watch as well. Nathan McKinnon leads the way. He's a 3-point lead over Connor McDavid. That should be a great Art Ross race the rest of the season. And shout out Casey DeSmith, Frank. Won again last night. He's 8-1-3. How about a 9.23 save percentage? Second only to Jesper Wallstedt, who will likely get the start tonight for the Minnesota Wild. And Leon Draisaitl, Frank, we're on 1,000 point watch. He's got 999 going into tonight's tilt.
Yeah, a couple milestones potentially on tap tonight in Pittsburgh, and none better, though, is seeing this clash. I'm sure you're going to see an ultra-motivated Stuart Skinner to go against his former team to jam it in their face to say, hey, you made a big mistake, let me go.
Again, we talk about it over 1,300 games. It's nice to occasionally, for whatever reason, get a regular season game with some juice. It was like that with Quinn Hughes' game number 1 after the trade. Probably there'll be still some tonight as well. Some juice for game number 2 against the Capitals. But this one in Pittsburgh should be a lot of fun tonight. Skinner against Jarry in the Berg. But our top story, it is the Buffalo Sabres. They fire GM Kevyn Adams Monday as 2.5 months into his 6th season as the GM of the Sabres. And they have hired Jarmo Kekalainen, who was hired in June as a senior advisor to take over in a full capacity. And interesting quote today from Kekalainen's news conference, Frank. He's going to give us every resource to eliminate any excuses about players wanting to come here. Of course, referring to Terry Pegula. Terry has given me full autonomy to run the hockey department. We can spend to the cap. That's one thing. The next thing is, finding a goalie. Will he find a new coach? What was your immediate reaction now to the Buffalo Sabres' next chapter? Will it be any different this time under Kekalainen?
Well, not really a surprise. I mean, when you saw the Sabres get off to the start that they did, you knew that Kevyn Adams and his time would be limited. I think even he knew and acknowledged with me on a podcast last year that heading into season number 5, that you had to start to make things happen and the Sabres needed to show some signs of improvement. But when you look at his 5.5 years as Buffalo Sabres GM, well, there's a few things that stand out. One is that they were never able to finish higher than 20th place in the entire NHL. And with that, you see that one season there, 42, 33, and 7 in 22, 23, right on the edge of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then they went backwards since then. And so you think about that, you think about the erosion of talent that has happened in Buffalo. And when you take a look at some of the guys that have been shuffled out of the Sabrehood over the last 10 years, most of these were under Kevyn Adams' watch. That includes Jack Eichel going to the Vegas Golden Knights, trading Brandon Montour for a 3rd-round pick. I mean, look at just the right side of this board. I mean, you can park Sam Reinhart, also traded by Kevyn Adams. You can take the left side and park it, which is heavy enough weight on its own. But look at the right side of this board. Marcus Foligno, Jake McCabe, Linus Ullmark, Dylan Cousins, JJ Peterka. They're all really nice building block pieces to having a successful team. So there's been an erosion of talent. There was a time period in which Kevyn Adams hung on to his players, probably a little bit too long, showed too much faith in them. And it was that inaction. It almost felt like paralysis by analysis watching from afar for a team that just continued to scuffle. Why aren't more moves being made? I guess when those are the moves that are made, you become a little gun shy or reticent to make others. And so I kind of understand that part of it, but Bucci, here's where they lose me. Jarmo Kekalainen. I mean, the guy that's been sitting here waiting for 8 months to knife Kevyn Adams in the neck and take over as general manager. I like, he's brought in to be he's the Grim Reaper sitting in the front office. And I think that part, when you look at Kekalainen's resume, 11 full seasons as NHL general manager, has he swung big a couple times? Yes. But also, for the most part, 11 years, he led 2 different rebuilds, and the Columbus Blue Jackets were the definition of mediocrity for a huge chunk of those 11 years. So if you're a Sabres fan, you want to see this team take off like a rocket ship. And I just don't know that we have enough track record to suggest over 11 seasons of Jarmo Kekalainen that he's going to be the guy to get them there.
Well, the Sabres in danger of extending their NFL record playoff drought to 15 years. They are 6 points out. They got to hop over just about the entire conference. They have been playing better of late. They've won 3 in a row. But, when I think about Kekalainen, Frank, it's in Columbus, he's traded for Panarin. He gave him a shot. And obviously the Johnny Gaudreau sweepstakes out of nowhere to sign him. I think if you're a Sabre fan, you want him to swing big. You mentioned he has a resume. He's 59 years old. This is probably going to be like his maybe his last shot to really make a major impact as a GM. He has all kinds of stuff to make a deal. He's got a lot of young players who've been drafted high. As we look at his resume there, and he's been waiting in the wings. He's been able to really look at all these players this year, evaluate them, and he has his own opinion of them already. So I think he could act quickly here because he has been there. He's been in place. We kind of saw this coming when he was hired, unless the Sabres got off to a great start. So, and 2 things that come to mind is number one for him, they have to get a backbone goaltender. If somehow they could have been on Spencer Knight, just imagine if you plug in Spencer Knight the way he's playing in Chicago this year, that kind of young goaltender is what they need to somehow identify and to find. And also, at some point, they need a culture building coach to start this thing from the ground up. And I just got to think he's calling Peter DeBoer today. Don't you think, Frank? That's his first phone call to see if he has any interest in trying to build this Buffalo organization up.
Well, I could certainly see that being the case. And when you look at what's next for the Sabres and Lindy Ruff certainly being at in the middle of the crossroads here in his second tenure and as Sabres coach, and then the non-committal response that he got today from Jarmo Kekalainen in that press conference, not really all that surprising for another guy, kind of like Kevyn Adams, that's felt like someone that's walking the plank. Rip the Band-Aid off. Let's
right.
Get going then. Because if your design was ultimately to have Jarmo Kekalainen replace Kevyn Adams, which we could all have seen coming from 100 miles away, then this next step would be this similar type move. Don't dither and don't sit around here and wait while you could make that coaching change. On the flip side, I would ask you, if you're Pete DeBoer and you're sitting on your couch, I'm going to check that and say, if you're Pete DeBoer and you're driving around with your skates in your car, which is what he said he was.
Correct.
Do the Sabres make you want to drive to the airport based on their lack of success over the last 15 years? If that's me, I'm saying thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to wait till an opportunity that comes up with a team that can win. I've gone to 6 Western Conference finals in 7 years as a coach. I'm not taking on a job like this where they've run through coaches like nobody's business and they've run through general managers. I mean, it's an amazing inflection point for the entire Buffalo Sabres organization to think, where is this team going from here? Yet again, we're at the spot where we're tossing the general manager out. At some point, do we have to look right to the very top of the organization and say, maybe they're not getting either the help that they need, maybe there's too much meddling, whatever it is, it's not an accident that Terry Pegula arrived in Buffalo, and in every full season since, they've yet to make the playoffs.
There's only 32 of those jobs, in terms of your Peter DeBoer question. There's not a lot of them. It would pay well. Obviously, he would demand a high price. He's been very successful, and I think, Terry Pegula would pay it. And he might see a lot here that I want to bring this thing back. But like you said, he has time to sit back. he hasn't missed a paycheck in a long time since he entered the league as a head coach. He's got the Olympics on his mind this year too. Not although he said he'll take a job before them he's an assistant coach for the Olympic team, so he certainly would take that. But he can pick. He can perhaps be a little picky. And let's face it, jobs always open in the National Hockey League.
So one thing I want to add, and look,
yeah,
Terry Pegula said this today that Jarmo Kekalainen is going to have all the resources available. If I'm a Sabres fan, that's the first thing I'm truly questioning. Yes, he's done a great job with the Buffalo Bills. This gleaming new billion-dollar stadium is being built in Orchard Park, and that's great. But I look at the way that this franchise has operated, particularly over the last year. He called in an extensive search to bring in Jarmo Kekalainen. Well, sources indicated that other guys who had interviewed for the position or guys that they had talked to, they wanted a very specific subset, someone who would be willing to come in as an advisor, not the president of hockey ops, someone who would be willing to work for a very specific salary and then be potentially promoted. They weren't really coming into this search guns blazing. And I think that's the part where you're going, all right, this has been a mess for the last 15 years. We want to be turning over every leaf possible to find the absolute smartest, best candidate for this job. And I can't look at Sabres fans based on the conversations that I knew that have happened over the last calendar year to say that they've actually put their best foot forward in trying to find that person and that solution. And I'm not saying Jarmo Kekalainen can't do it or won't be that guy. I'm just saying that's not the course of action that's been taken to this point.
All right. Well, we're going to talk with Matthew Fairburn, who certainly has his pulse on this. He was the one who reported for The Athletic last week that this kind of looks like it's coming. And then with these 3 days off, Monday, today, tomorrow, before they play again against the Flyers, I'll be doing that game on ESPN Plus. So I head to Buffalo tomorrow. I'll see firsthand what the response is and what the feeling is around Buffalo. But we'll talk to Matthew, hit a couple topics, then go back to Buffalo and get some more inside reporting for Matthew as well. Meanwhile, let's move on to Connor Bedard. The shoulder injury looks like now, you mentioned yesterday on the show, Frank, that, January-ish now sounds like the return. That's going to be about, probably about 10 games, give or take. Our boy, Kevin Weeks said it was a separated shoulder, which is what I kind of looked at. Now, what that means in terms of damage, did he tear something in there that eventually he'll need to surgically repair? We talked about that, how hockey players get their shoulders and hips worked on a lot in the offseason. They power through in the regular season. So we'll see if that's the case. But Connor Bedard, boy, that is a huge hole in this lineup. He is by far their best player. It's going to be very interesting to see this team. They look like they're right back in lottery land again if Bedard's going to miss 15 games.
Yeah, and that's the tough part is you take a look at the Chicago Blackhawks lineup and you go, oof, this really gets thin in a hurry again because Frank Nazar is such an incredibly talented player who's had a last tough month because he's also been banged up. He's been dealing with a hip pointer that he just can't get right. That has been incredibly sore for him to try and play through. And with that, you've seen that dip in production. So who are you going to rely on if you're the Hawks without Connor Bedard to be your engine, to be your guy that can drive you? And there's some exciting parts to this lineup. Like I look at that third line as we see it on our screen in particular, Oliver Moore, Ryan Green, and Nick Lardis, who was just called up and has sort of made an immediate impact contribution. That's sort of the wave of the future, but those guys can't carry you through right now. And you're right. I mean, you said right back in lottery land, and half of me goes, maybe that's not the worst thing for the Hawks. But then you think about the start that they were off to and how excited everyone was in Chicago. And you're like, everything kind of comes crashing down or it comes to a halt, screeches to a halt with this Bedard injury.
Right. Because again, we just talked about Buffalo. We'll talk about them again here in a second, but you want to get some momentum. You want to get into a playoff position. You want to get some playoff experience. It probably a bit of a long shot they were going to make it this year. Would have been kind of close. We'll see what they would have done. But yeah, to keep going year after year after year, you get younger and younger and younger. But again, we talked about it. Don't you think at some point Chicago is going to pull a big time trade when every one of these, whether the Quinn Hughes guys, they become available? Well, at some point, will Brady Tkachuk say, you know what? I don't want to be an auto anymore. And someone's going to throw a package to get Brady Tkachuk. At some point, they need to wait for that kind of player, or they need that kind of player, that kind of trade, don't you think, to make that move up? Because all these guys, I don't see future Bedards in this lineup that we see. A lot of good players, but I wonder, are we going to see any big enough stars to move the needle by themselves?
Those are the hardest pieces to acquire, right? I mean,
They are, yeah.
they're the generational type players, and I know that label has been hung on him, and it probably wasn't fair for a stretch of time. But to get a level of that player, a superstar, it's really hard to do. And I was kind of surprised that they weren't more involved in the Quinn Hughes sweepstakes. I thought they're probably closer than they even realize or think. And I know that sounds funny to say for a team who's just kind of on the cusp, but you said it last week, and it's really gotten me thinking about, you can win with guys in their early to mid 20s. And before you know it, you snap your fingers and you blink and these guys are 28. Just look at the Toronto Maple Leafs now. And you go, we had all these kicks at the can and we didn't get the job done. What if we just kind of, that window passes you by before you even know it? And if the Hawks were able to get a Quinn Hughes, because they could have put together that type of package, they weren't.
Absolutely.
But I mean, what about the next guy that pops up? And it might be in sooner than you realize.
Right. I mean, would Vancouver have taken Levshinov and Nazar and a kid they drafted last year?
Would have been a better package in my view, but
and you're instantly that changes your organization with one trade, which is what happened with Minnesota. And that's why when we talked about yesterday, when these players become available, like Jack Eichel did by Buffalo, you have to go hard after these guys because they just don't become available, like you said, and you don't know when they are next. Okay, this guy's now available. I must get him because I don't know when the next guy. It happens, like I said. We said every couple of years. It was Eichel when he became available, and then maybe Tkachuk might be in a couple of years, and Matthew was certainly when he said, "I'm not going to sign here." When that happens, man, you got to go and you got to go hard. But we'll see. Again, Bedard tied for fifth in the league with 19 goals, was off to a great start, tied with Marchand, Crosby, and Horvat. Very interesting triumvirate that he was tied with, and just a freaky face-off play at the end of that St. Louis game with a shoulder injury. And we hope he can come back soon because he's been a joy to watch this year. Not now. I think he's definitely out now. Like even if he wasn't to begin with, he might have been a bubble guy to begin with. But I think this just too much uncertainty with the shoulder makes it easier for Canada to say, "Oh, let's wait." What do you think?
Yeah, makes it easier to say no. But I'm going to present to you the alternative viewpoint, which is, if he can't go, it's a free space on the bingo card that you then have bought yourself a few weeks of extra time. Because you can replace that player leading up to the Olympics. So I would select him and say it's his spot. He's played well enough. He's earned it. And if not, you know who your next guy up is that you're replacing him with, say, mid to late January, a week before the Olympics, and see if he's come back and played at that same level that he was at before. If he can't, then you replace him anyway and say that his shoulder's too damaged to play. That's my viewpoint, is give yourself, what's that old Lou Lamoriello line? If you have time, use it. Buy yourself a free space on the bingo card that you otherwise would not have had.
Carolina Hurricanes. They've won 4 in a row, Frank. Third best point percentage in the NHL. They play in Nashville tomorrow. They're 9th in goals for, 9th in goals against. Power play's not good, 29th in the league. PK is actually tied for 18th. Normally much better. Normally they're a top 5 under Rod Brindamore. Seth Jarvis having a great year, 18 goals. No one else has double digits. Very balanced from there. Shane Gostisbehere, what a quiet season he's having. 24 points in 23 games. A point per game defenseman for them. Slavin just got back. And now they got the goaltending story of the year and Brandon Bussey. Everyone's riding the bus in Carolina right now. This guy is the best start in the history of the NHL in terms of a goaltending winning streak.
He needs to play more. It's as simple as that. And Rod Brindamore has made it clear that he has earned more of an opportunity. He's one of the great stories that, with all these other things to talk about, whether it's been Quinn Hughes or the Connor Bedard injury or the Jarry trade or whatever it's been, it's the Canes and they're not getting enough attention. The best team in the Eastern Conference who just played 2 months without their best defenseman. And it's not just Slavin that they've been missing. The fact that this team has remained as consistent as they have, John, to me is an amazing testament to Rod Brindamore and the coaching staff and the system and structure that they've put in place. No Slavin, no Keandre Miller, no Gostisbehere these guys have gone down and out and they don't miss a beat. Svechnikov had a really tough start to the season. Nick Ehlers won a ton of games without scoring. And yet they have been right there. I think they are clearly far and away, and we're going to talk about one more before we get to Matthew Fairburn, but I think they are clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference to this point. Would you fight me on that?
No, the special teams worry me a little bit, but again, I agree. They were my preseason pick to get to the Cup final this year when ESPN asked us for our predictions. I had Carolina because I thought there was an opening with Toronto and the Marner going away and the injury to Barkov in case it was season ending. But yeah, they're just a professional unit. I mean, 4 lines, they go, go, go. They've had great symmetry. Obviously, they have a real sense of calm with Brindamore there. He really is an interesting head coach. He's almost really like the president and owner and everything of that team. I don't think any coach in the league has a bigger imprint on the team that he works for than Rod Brindamore. It's just very unique. And the Stankoven trade, has worked out so far pretty good. They get Hall. They just go and again, Aho hasn't really cooked yet. Svechnikov remains a bit of an enigma. What is he? You wonder at some point if he will be a trade piece that they'll try to just kind of reconfigure themselves just a tad, because their fear, Frank, is to go back in the postseason. Here we go again. Maybe we finish number 1 in the East, and then it's again we can't get to the Cup final, and it's really the same team for the most part. K'Andre Miller's been a great addition. He's really resurrected his career in a way. He's still very young, but he looks like he's a much better fit there. Again, Nikishin is a future star. He's an absolute horse. That's a nice set of defensemen. Not surprising Bussy is playing well. I'm sure he's very comfortable playing behind these defensemen. But yeah, I'm bullish on Carolina. But what I love about them too is, man, they are gunslingers when it comes to making trades. You wonder what they might do. Do you think there's one more piece out there you think they might try to add?
Yeah, the Svechnikov conversation is interesting, right? I mean,
it is.
I don't see them being super open to it because I think they think he's going to find a way to rebound here. But they've been as aggressive. I mean, name for me a team that's been more aggressive than Carolina. I mean, you could probably throw some candidates out there. Florida with the significant moves that they've made. Dallas going to get Rantanen after Carolina already grabbed him. I mean, they don't really stop at no. They keep pushing to try and find that next solution somewhere. And I think their overall philosophy is, let's give ourselves as many kicks at this as possible, because one year you're just going to break through. Tom Dundon once explained it to me as a series, 4 rounds of 7 games of coin flips. And so if you think about it through that prism, you go, okay, well, we didn't win the flip this time, but maybe next year if we have a team that's just as competitive, and here they are again, 7 years in a row under Rod Brindamore, they've won at least 1 round. The first coach in NHL history to ever do that. So why not them? Why can't they be the team that breaks through finally in a year that, I mean, the Eastern Conference seems as wide open as it's ever been?
And Svechnikov was good in the postseason last year. My question is, though, in the end, it's tough to evaluate your goaltending right now when you're on this much of a heater. But is he Calvin Pickard in the end? There was a reason why he wasn't drafted in the minors and was, and got a chance kind of late in his career. But certainly plenty of goalies have come on late. Tim Thomas comes to mind. Aiden Hill, he's big. He's confident right now, so maybe you just go with them. And again, I'm sure if there's something out there and it presents itself, they'll be aggressive if they feel like they can upgrade the position. But that's still going to be the question mark for them. Do they have a goalie that can win multiple playoff rounds when it's so different? You're playing a great team every night. You're going against elite shooters every night. Equal rest. There's no back-to-backs for either. It's going to be interesting to see. That's why I love. What do they really think about? I always love to play, Frank. What does this team really think about their player? You always wonder when they have that meeting or inside their heads, or the GM or the coach, what do they really think about that guy? Do they really believe that Bussy can be a Stanley Cup playoff game-winning goalie?
Well, what's exciting about the Canes, and I know we'll wrap and move on, is they think about their players in a different way than everyone else, which is, does this player fit within what Rod Brindamore wants to do? That's how they evaluate every transaction. It's not, almost no other team does that because they're not sure if that coach is going to be there in a year and a half. The Canes can do that because they're locked in on Rod Brindamore, and with that, they build their team in a very specific, methodical fashion. And that's part of the reason why they're able to have success. There are no square pegs that they're jamming into round holes once they get there. They know kind of ahead of time.
Cool. Let's move on to the Florida Panthers, the team that obviously Carolina is trying to supplant in the Eastern Conference. And you mentioned the Hurricanes have been the best team so far, but the Panthers are sexy again, Frank. 60% of the time, they work every time. They've won 5 of 6. They're 3 points out of first. They beat Tampa last night 5-2. They've beaten Tampa in 5 games in the first round in each of their Stanley Cup playoff runs. Both years, they beat Tampa in 5. It's been the first step to them winning the Cup, which is even sweeter for the Sunshine State team. And looks like still without Tkachuk, still without obviously Barkov. And Brad Marchand said it last night. They're starting to figure out now how to win with the team they have. Marchand leads them in goals.
It's a scary thought for everyone else if they're figuring out how to win without those guys, because in relatively short order, Matthew Tkachuk will be back. Wouldn't shock me. I know that it's going to be on a wonky ice surface, but it wouldn't shock me to see him make his return at the Winter Classic, because we know how much that means to the franchise, and he's been working his arse off to get back. All the skating that he's done without pucks, trying to reimagine and fix the mechanics so that his body is ready to go when he's playing again. But I think when you look at this team and how they figured it out, and it's not just those two guys, they've had injuries on the back end. The way that they're able to play, like you go against Tampa last night, and again, both those teams are trying to run each other through the second row of the seats, and yet they're perfectly comfortable. You want to play that way? Okay, sure. But we can also play a speed game. We can play a finesse game. We can do whatever it is that you want. We'll play you any way, any style. And so the fact that this team has won 5 of 6, the fact that they're in a spot where they've beaten some really good teams, as you've looked at the calendar over the last couple of weeks, and you look at their numbers since the month of December, they're trending in the right direction at kind of the exact right time. And the tough part for everyone else, Bucci, is the rest of the East left the door right open for them to waltz on through it once they started to figure it out.
They did. Reinhart was doing nothing at the beginning of the year. Now he's up to 17 goals, a shorty and a power play. That speaks to him, one of the best all-around players in the league. Carter Verhaeghe, really slow start. But, wife has a baby. Boom. He's been fine ever since. The daddy strength has kicked in. So, the Panthers look like they're getting healthy, and then they're going to get healthier with Matthew Tkachuk, and then we'll see, and then we'll probably start to hear the timetable about Barkov, probably around the Olympic break. Okay, where is he with that ACL? Could he play hockey in 2 months and be ready for the postseason? That'll be probably that chatter will probably start to pick up here once he's 6 months, 5-6 months past when the surgery happened, when he tore that ACL. So let's get back to our top story, the Buffalo Sabres. Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic joining us now here on Frankly Hockey. And Matthew, we heard Jarmo speak today. What's the headline from Jarmo speak? And also, what would you tell the Sabre fan watching right now, your overall impressions?
I think the headline right now is that everybody's under evaluation, right? Nobody got a firm commitment from Jarmo Kekalainen, and that includes head coach Lindy Ruff. So there's still some moving pieces, I think, here in Buffalo. But my big takeaway, and one that I think the fans should probably hold on to and pay attention to, is the fact that Jarmo Kekalainen said he has full autonomy over this hockey department. And Terry Pegula, he's had a lot of conversations with him about making sure they have every resource available to check all the boxes to make this a really attractive place to play. That includes spending to the cap, but also being detail-oriented on non-player spending and what it means to make this an attractive hockey destination, again, for players around the league. Those are words. We need to see it backed up with action, but I think under Kevyn Adams, that part wasn't always true. And so Jarmo Kekalainen, being an outsider, being somebody that has a great reputation around hockey, he's firm, he's confident, he's a leader. Those are all qualities I think they were lacking. And if he can manage upwards, so to speak, with Terry Pegula, I think that could be an important piece of the puzzle.
So, Matthew, you mentioned that those are words, and the reporting from you has been tremendous of late, particularly last week in getting that news that the Sabres were considering some changes. So hats off to you. But when it comes to those words that are said, Kevyn Adams was kind of a dyed-in-the-wool Terry Pegula Sabres guy. He worked in the business side before coming over to the hockey ops side. If he couldn't be the guy that sort of pushed this in the right direction and put in place some of those things to make it a really attractive place to play, why should Sabre fans have confidence that Jarmo Kekalainen can do the same?
You know, Jarmo Kekalainen's resume is obviously not perfect, right? He made plenty of mistakes in Columbus. That's why he is the former general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets. But I actually think an outside perspective is more valuable than what Kevyn Adams brought to the table. You mentioned he was a Pegula guy through and through. Kevyn Adams would not have been a general manager anywhere else, given his resume before he got the general manager job. I think that made him uniquely challenged in being the person to tell Terry Pegula what needed to happen. If you remember when he got the job, Terry Pegula spoke about the need to be economic, efficient, and effective. And one of the first things Kevyn Adams did was gut the hockey operations department and fire a bunch of people that Jason Botterill did not want to fire, part of why Botterill lost his job. And so the difference here with Kekalainen is he offers an outside perspective. He offers somebody who does not owe his career to Pegula and hopefully can speak some sense into him. Ultimately, Pegula owns the team. He's the one who writes the check. So, you know, if the business has been challenged by the lack of winning, the attendance has been hurting, and that's hurt the bottom line. So ultimately, we'll see if Pegula can back up the words that Kekalainen spoke today. But I have more confidence than an outside perspective, particularly from Kekalainen, but I think also from Lindy Ruff in the last 18 months or so, has helped, you know, speak a little bit of sense into Pegula about what it's going to take to get this team back to the playoffs.
Let's go back to the hockey operations department, and you can say I'm going to spend to the cap, but the question is, are they spending to the cap in the offices, in the scouting departments, in the travel budgets, in the pro scouting, in the amateur scouting? It seemed like, you know, I've been covering games there now for the last 5 years in Buffalo. I seem to have 3 or 4 games a year there. It just seems like they were shorthanded in the front office, just from a personnel standpoint. Is that true? And do you think we'll start to see did it need a more robust hockey operations department roster, whether it's, you know, experience, ability, and just pure numbers?
I think at the beginning of the Kevyn Adams era, they were definitely way shorthanded. And you were talking about, you know, one of the most inexperienced general managers in the league operating with a staff that didn't have a lot more experience than he did. And over time, they built it back up to be a more standard operation. But I think what's important now, and where you have to follow the clues of their actions, is will Kekalainen be able to bring in some of his own people, regardless of the size of the staff and whether it's the biggest in the league or whether they spend the most on staffing? Do they spend enough to get the right people around Kekalainen and not handcuff him to people that because they have contracts or because it's convenient? That's what we saw a little bit, I think, with Lindy Ruff. He did not get to pick any of his own assistant coaches, and he inherited everybody from Don Granato's staff. The only new addition was Seth Appert, who was promoted from Rochester. So if Kekalainen is going to get the autonomy that he says he has, that he says Pegula is willing to give him, that's a big piece of it, being able to make these decisions independent of what it might mean to the bottom line. So I'm focused a little more on that than I am necessarily counting how many people are on the staff or things like that.
Gotcha.
Matthew, what is the day one objective for Jarmo Kekalainen? What's the first priority, the first order of business? Is it solving the questions around the coaching staff, given how non-committal he was in his opening press conference, or is there something bigger, more pressing than that?
That definitely feels like number one on the list, because you got a game on Thursday night and you got to find out who's behind the bench, right? And if it's not Lindy Ruff, this is a unique situation, I think, because you're talking about a franchise legend, both as a player and a coach, a guy who did not need to come back for a second go around, but, you know, felt a commitment to this franchise to want to get it right. He deserves, if he's not going to be the coach, he deserves to have some say in what that looks like and where things go from here. So that strikes me as number one. Figure that out, get some clarity on that, not only right now, but into the future, because whether Ruff coaches the rest of the season or not, his days are somewhat numbered in the profession. He's getting up there in age. It is believed that this is the last year of his contract. So, they do have to get some clarity on that beyond this season as well. And then after that, to me, it's Alex Tuch, priority number one, right? You got to figure that situation out. Are you signing Alex Tuch? Are you going to be able to get him under contract? And if not, you've got a few months to the NHL trade deadline. And I would say you got to figure something out, because I don't think you can let him walk away for nothing, considering the type of asset he is, considering how hard it is to attract free agents to come play here, given all the losing. You can't squander an asset. So they got to figure out if Tuch wants to stay, and they got to, come to some sort of resolution if he doesn't.
Ruff turned 66 during the Olympic break. I talked about at the top of the show, Matthew, two things come to mind for me for this team. It's trying to identify, like you said, the coach for the next 5-6 years. Is Jarmo going to call Pete DeBoer today and say, what's your interest in this job? Is today the day that if he can get someone he wants right now, with 3 days off, this is the day to do it, to make a coaching change if he's having that conversation? Do you think that's possible? He's talking to him. And B, it would be get a goalie. And Tuch, sounds like Tuch's people want 10 to 11 million. I'm sure he's looking at the Nature's contract, and that's his comp in his mind, I'm sure. But if you can get a goalie, if you can identify a franchise goalie in a Tuch type trade, and you get a lot for Tuch at the deadline, for sure, I would think enough. Those two things, I think, for Jarmo, he's got to find, right, the coach that he envisions to electrify this organization and help organize it from top to bottom, to put it in his image, whoever coach it is, and then to find a backbone goalie. Do they have the backbone goalie already now? Or what's your take on those two, the coaching and the goalie?
I will say I don't know for sure whether DeBoer would, be somebody on their radar, whether that's something he would even be interested in. Part of me thinks he would have better options. But, certainly that would signal that the financial commitment is serious. Right?
Exactly. Right.
Those would be the actions that we're talking about. But I don't know for sure. The goalie puzzle is interesting because they've carried 3 for a lot of the year. Colton Ellis is on injured reserve, so they have kind of a break from having 3 goalies. I would say they don't have a true franchise goalie. They hoped that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen would fill that, role when he signed a contract worth $4.75 million per year. I believe he's got 3 years left on it after this year. All of a sudden, not the easiest contract to trade, given his numbers. Alex Lyon has been a really solid goalie for them this year at times. He got off to a great start, fell off a bit, then he didn't see the net for a while. Now he seems to have wrestled it back on their most recent road trip. But they also have Devin Levi under contract. So they have 4 goalies who are under contract on NHL deals going into next season. So even the 3 goalie situation, if it's temporarily resolved, you need to figure out this 4 goalie situation. And I'm intrigued because, to your point, you want that franchise goalie, and you want that guy that could make a big difference in taking an average team to being one that can, get into the playoffs. It can change everything. Kevyn Adams was so devoted to Devin Levi and the idea of Devin Levi working out. I'm really curious to see what Kekalainen's evaluation is of him, because if he doesn't view him the same way, then you're right. They've definitely got to make a move. As far as Tuch goes, I think there's a chance that this move will spark some interest from him in re-signing. I think the uncertainty and the lack of clarity around the future of this franchise might have been somewhat of a holdup. My question there is also going to come back to money. And part of it is what you said, that, that the Martin Necas or the Adrian Kempe contracts are kind of the ballpark, right? Probably 10 million. Right. He can get 8 years here, so he can get the total value, would be more. And this is going to be the biggest payday of his career, probably the last payday of his career. The big piece of it that I've been writing about is the signing bonus piece. And you look at all these contracts that are getting signed, they are heavily signing bonus, front loaded. And the Sabres haven't offered a lot of those contracts. And will they change that philosophy and make an exception for a player like Tuch, who has every reason to want that signing bonus, right? It protects you from a buyout in a lot of ways, protects you from a lockout in the event of a lockout, but it really protects you from a buyout. And he's going to turn 30 when this contract starts. So he deserves to get that signing bonus because all his peers are getting it. And the Sabres might have to look around and say, this is the market, this is the demand that has been created by some of these contracts, and they need to step up and meet it.
If we could put a bow on this conversation by summing up how would you characterize Kevyn Adams' tenure? I think for me, Matthew, the thing that stands out is like he was willing to live and die by the players that he picked and chose for this team. That in the end, there seemed to be a lot of belief that, hey, this group can find a way to turn the corner. And over the last 2-3 seasons, it hasn't really changed in a hugely significant way. And then in the end, he gets, as I mentioned off the top of the show, he gets knifed in the neck by the guy that was brought in to be his quote advisor. Probably a really uncomfortable last 8 to 10 months for him. When you consider his tenure as a whole, how would you sum it up?
To me, look, you could go through line by line every move Kevyn Adams made. There was some good, there was a lot of bad. He obviously did not build a playoff team, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think this all boils down to, when I think about the Kevyn Adams tenure, it's going to boil down to a lack of leadership. I think this organization has lacked leadership on the ice, but it's also lacked leadership at the top. And I think Kevyn Adams bears a lot of responsibility for that, because when the pressure increased is when he became a different person publicly. Some of his remarks, and messages that he delivered to the fans really soured people on him. And it was tough for him to get his reputation back on track after that. And at times he seemed hesitant to make moves, right? A 13-game winless streak last year, and he doesn't touch the roster. And not being proactive enough, not being bold enough with some of his decisions, to me, was a reflection of, some of that leadership that I talked about. Contrast that with Kekalainen, who is pretty firm, pretty bold, pretty direct. He's made a lot of big swings in his career. Not all of them have worked out, but he said today he operates with the mindset that he doesn't want to be afraid to make a mistake, and he wants that to trickle down to the players. I think it can. I think he has a presence about him that Kevyn Adams lacked. And, for all the ups and downs of Adams' roster building and decision making, that's what it comes down to for me, is just a lack of vision and a lack of leadership. Despite accumulating a lot of talent, he never really built a team. And I think Kekalainen has a better chance to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly, Matthew. That's all I look at. There's more to being a GM than just getting good players, drafting good players when you're always drafting high. It's building that organization. And again, covering those games there when I did, you're there obviously on the ground a lot more, but it just seemed like that was lacking. It just didn't seem like that edge wasn't quite there. And I think it's going to be there. And I just wonder if they're going to do something huge, like they trade Owen Power, like it's like a real attention getting, like, this is what I think about these guys and this team, and I'm going to make a big move because this is my chance to do it, because nothing is working. We're coming up on 15 straight years missing the playoffs. Well, Matthew, I'm off to Buffalo tomorrow to call that game on Thursday, the first one in the Jarmo era. Hope to run into you there if you're in town. And thanks so much for joining us. That was absolute great reporting leading up to the replacement as the general manager. And we'll see you down the road, Matthew.
Thanks so much for having me. I'll see you soon.
Great stuff. Awesome. Matthew Fairburn with some just great stuff there. It's an interesting story. I know it's one with 15 straight years of not making the playoffs if they don't make it this year, Frank, but it's an interesting market. It's a small town, diehard market. If we started over with expansion teams, 32 new teams, Buffalo probably wouldn't have a team. These fans love their team, and to have the Bills. That's the part of the story, Frank, is the same owner has this Bills team with the best player in the league and a good new stadium, and there's so much hope. And this might be the year they win that Super Bowl finally. And then you have the hockey team, this little boutique thing on the side that I think the fans think that he kind of neglects a little bit.
Well, neglects or meddles in, like, I don't think it's neglect. I think he's just hands all over it. I mean, people make the joke that the true president of hockey operations for the Sabres is Terry Pegula, and there's probably shreds of truth in that. I don't think it's by any lack of care or want to win or hunger or anything like that. I think
For sure.
they've just gotten in their own way, and the NHL as a whole is better when the Buffalo Sabres are good. I covered so many games there through a lot of their heyday in the 2000s that was a full building and one of the best places in the league to watch a game. And it just hasn't been, and I can't fault any of the fans there for any sort of malaise or lack of interest that's come over that city, because there hasn't been a lot to root for. And there have been exciting players, but you're right, they haven't strung it together on any sort of consistent basis. And they've also been met with some inaction, and that part stands out.
All right. Well, they got a good group of young players. Like I said, I still think you call Pete DeBoer and offer the moon and say, you're our guy. We need you to save hockey. And you get Terry Pagula to call him as well. And because they need a simmering presence like him, a serious simmering presence. We saw what ended in Dallas last year. That's because he's a highly competitive guy and a very successful coach. And I think he'd be part of the answers there. And because in the end, it's about the players, and the players need to step up. Maybe they're just not as good as we think they are. And at some point, they got to step up and be serious hockey players and be a serious organization and get going. Because in the end, they can pull this thing together as a group and go and have a great second half and make the playoffs. They're good enough to do it.
That's why Jarmo Kekalainen talked about character and hunger to win today.
Right.
It starts in their locker room, and there's just been this acceptance of losing. And I think Matthew nailed it square on when he said lack of leadership from top to bottom. It's been on the ice, it's been off the ice. And that acceptance of mediocrity is just, that's been the definition of the Buffalo Sabres.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting there tomorrow. Smash some chicken parm for lunch, and then call the Flyers and Sabres Thursday on ESPN Plus with AJ Malesko, the gold medalist. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's ask the insider. That, of course, Frank. And let's talk about Darcy Kuemper last night in Dallas. Took a little, had a little injury, had to leave the game. And is the latest with him? Are the Olympics in jeopardy for Darcy?
I mean, look, we've arrived at this point mid-December. 2 weeks from tomorrow is when rosters are due to be selected. And
right,
a lot of people have Darcy Kuemper on their Olympic team, but every night, night after night, we are all holding our breath, whether it was Bedard, Kuemper, Brandon Hagel yesterday. I mean, it's every single night there's a different guy whose Olympics are now, hey, is that going to be problematic for his candidacy? And look, the way Kuemper left the game after this collision with Mikko Rantanen certainly didn't like the look for him. And that forearm shiver to the head, I mean, that's the tough part about an injury like this. If it is a concussion, that how do you predict? How do you know when he's going to be right again? Hate to see it. And should this have been a penalty? What do you think?
I mean, he's in the blue paint enough. I think it should have been a penalty.
So
I mean, Darcy's
officials,
you see, he's in the paint, and boom. I think that's a penalty.
Yeah. Yeah, the officials told the Kings that he was outside of the blue paint just enough that Mikko Rantanen had nowhere else to go. And so therefore it was deemed to be incidental contact. Obviously, Corey Perry gave Mikko Rantanen a piece of his mind for that collision. Yeah, no love lost between these two teams, but hate to see Kuemper go down, and obviously going to be watching this really closely with those selections due 2 weeks from tomorrow.
All right, hashtag hockey. Let's jump on the social. Chris Kreider, of course, always a great moment when a player returns, especially someone who's been there for a long time. I think we're a little bit liberal with some of these video tributes we give to players when they played somewhere for about a year and a half or something, 3 weeks. Throw the video up there. But Kreider was a very popular Ranger. And last night, the Ducks visiting, they beat the Rangers and got a great ovation from the crowd. Do we have that ovation, Frank? Do we have that?
Yeah, let's take a listen.
A standing ovation for Chris Kreider, saluting the fans here at Madison Square Garden, who just watched the video during the TV.
My question for you, should Chris Kreider's number hang in the rafters at MSG when it's all said and done?
Yeah, my first, so this came up last year, I think, and my first reaction was no. Like when it just didn't quite, in my mind, jump to that level. But 339 goals, very strong, and I'm sure, and that's like 5-6 years ago, and I started saying, Brad Marchand is going to get his number retired someday in Boston, and people are like, what? Oh, yeah. Really? Are you sure? And but again, he's continued to produce at his age. Kreider's going to get up to 400 goals in his career probably when it's all said and done. But he grew up there, drafted there. He says he was just a boy when he showed up. He played college hockey at BC for 3 years, and he shows up in New York. and played a few minor league games, not many, 54. But other than that, he really grew up as a Ranger. They loved his style of play. Very likable player, obviously simple, right down the middle, and some great years. Obviously, the 52 goal year was a massive year for him. So it sounds like in the end, from the Ranger people who watch every day and around him, that he's going to get his number retired for sure. And it's just about a lock as a Ranger Hall of Famer and a number retired guy. But like I said, when it came up last year, I thought, well, other than that 3-year run was great, 52, 36, 39. But other than that, 20 goal guy for the most part, even sometimes a little less than 20 goals. But yeah, I think it will happen. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I'll throw some numbers at you. So 14 seasons as a blue shirt. There's a 100-year history, by the way. So not a fledgling franchise. Third in goals all time. First in power play goals. Second in game-winning goals. Eighth in games played. And 11th all time in points. Those are pretty significant franchise contributions.
We are. And the Rangers, let's face it, they don't have a rich history of winning and really, superstar players. They've got these little pockets. Obviously, the 70s, they were really good. If it weren't for the Bruins and Bobby Orr, they might have even got a cup. Brad Park is an amazing player, an all-time great, really. Those were some fun, great teams. Esposito, after the big trade, and almost stole one with him late in his career, late in the decade. So they had a great run there. And of course, the Messier and that whole thing was an amazing experience, but no cup since then. But yeah, and his playoff run the last couple of years was really strong too. I mean, 24 goals in 43 games. That was like the last 3 playoff runs for the Rangers. So yeah, I think we will definitely see his number up there in the rafters at MSG. All right, you got to speculate to accumulate. We're all over this Oiler-Penguin game tonight. If you missed the top of the show, just joining us, it's Oilers-Penguins. It's Skinner against Jarry. It's Brett Kulak wearing number 77. It's the Penguins blowing their last 2 third-period lead games like in abysmal fashion. So there's a lot. Connor McDavid starting to go. Draisaitl's a point away from 1,000. So we're focused on this game, and you're focused on the board and this game, Frank. Let's go.
I'm picking the anti-Jarry, anti-Skinner narrative. I'm going Oilers and Pens over 6.5 goals. No one is happy. No one feels good about this afterwards, but I just think the recipe is there. As dialed in as these guys are going to be to try and, make a statement. Jarry for his new team, Skinner against his old team. I'm just thinking this could be a night where you see some fireworks just off the sticks that make this go. So I'm going Oilers Pens over 6.5, coming off of a big win last night. Stars on the puck line, getting us up to plus 3.7 units on the season.
See, my fear would be for you, and I always fear for you, is these teams and their teammates of Jarry and Skinner really want this for them, right? So the way to do that, of course, is to play. It could be a tight defensive type hockey game because both teams want to win for their goalie because they know how much it means to them to beat the other team. That's what makes this game so great tonight, and I can't wait for it. But you're kind of going the other way.
Pizza factor, like you could get the old pepperoni pizza every now and again. Darnell Nurse, Evan Bouchard, prone to turnovers. Like, I mean, neither one of these teams defended exceptionally well.
Yeah, there's a lot of pizza chefs in this game. It could be Domino's Central here, just pizza everywhere. So, and we'll see if the goalies can cover for that, or like you said, we could have a scoring fest on our hands. It's gonna be fun to watch. But I'm still fearful for you for that fact. But I'll be, as always,
that's okay.
I root for Frank. Quite frankly,
you know what I say? What? If you're scared, get a dog.
Good point. I don't have a dog. The last word. Farewell, Matthews Arena, a great old barn.
So long.
It's Northeastern University. There it is.
Shame to see it go.
Final time. That was before their game against Boston University on Saturday night, which they heartbreakingly lost. SPU scored 2 goals late in about 3 seconds to take a 1-goal deficit to a 1-goal win. But yeah, that beautiful barn opened before Fenway Park, Frank, 1910. Bob Dylan played there. The Doors played there. Northeastern Hockey played there. The Bruins played there. The Celtics played there. And now we're tearing it down and build a new one. And they're going to have to be on the road for 2 straight years, Northeastern, because you know, obviously this is in the heart of Boston. If people weren't aware, Northeastern University is in downtown Boston. So you just can't, you can't build another arena, a space to build one and then tear that down. So they're going to tear it down. They're going to auction off a lot of seats and bricks and stuff. So if you're into that kind of thing, you can find it on the machine there and find out how you can maybe buy a seat or a brick. But yeah, that's the one thing about our country that we tend to do. We tend to tear down our incredible historical sport venues. I think about the Orange Bowl, and I used to drive by the Orange Bowl, back in the 80s and 90s. I could just feel the history. Doug Flutie's past, the Steelers winning, Lynn Swann winning the Super Bowl 10 there, and just all those moments there. And then we just tear these things down and they're gone.
Yeah. And this one was the oldest surviving, continually used indoor ice arena in the United States. As you mentioned, 1910. The Bruins logo is on here because they played there, as you mentioned, to start. Johnny Busick on hand to commemorate the end of Matthews Arena. And yeah, just there's nothing really quite like this place. It is oddly configured and obstructed seat view heaven, and that didn't really quite fit. And yet they made it go for a long time. I understand why they're making the change, but still sad to see this one go.
Yeah, I remember I checked out a couple of years ago when David Quinn was the head coach. I wanted to see a young freshman named Clayton Keller play in person. And so I went to Matthews and just sat there in the stands, just to take it all in. Remember, Don Sweeney was there at the time. He was doing some scouting for the Bruins. It's a great place. Boston's a great college hockey town. You can see so many players in a small area. But yeah, they sing the student section sings Stacy's Mom. That's kind of one of their tradition anthems, and they sang it one more time in Matthews on the Saturday night. So yeah, hat tip to Matthews Arena and to the future at Northeastern. It's been a good hockey program the last few years, and they'll have a brand new shiny building in a couple of years. But until then, a lot of road games for Northeastern. All right, good show. Packed to the gills. Hardcore Buffalo Sabre talk. Would be fun to see how that transpires. What happens there? Will there be a coach? Will there be some big Jarmo trades? Will he be swinging from the heels early, or will he take it slow? We're going to find out. Frank, of all the shows you've done, that might have been the best one. Thanks for stepping up.
Well, I do what I can and appreciate you. Great job hanging with you. And man, I'm going to have to do a lot of thinking about this Sabres team. What do you do with Owen Power? And
it's fun. Exactly.
There's just a lot to consider. So we have some time to figure it out.
We do. Can't wait. All right. Enjoy the hockey tonight, folks. Thanks so much for streaming. Thanks so much for downloading and do whatever you do to watch us every day. We love hockey. You love hockey. We'll see you tomorrow.